We're going to move on to thoracolumbar. So the muscles that I chose for this one are the external obliques and then the longissimus. The external obliques do flexion bilaterally. So here when you're doing like a crunch, and then they also do rotation. So when you rotate to this side, this external oblique is working, and then opposite. So the origin for the external obliques are the lower 8 ribs, and then they insert into the linea alba, the pubic tubercle, and the ASIS. And then they do not perform passive or active insufficiency because they don't cross over 2 joints. So if I were to have Angelo stretch his external obliques, I can have him go into extension. So I'm going to have you do like a prone press up. So it's on your tummy. Here, and then he can go ahead and press up onto his forearms or hands. So that's stretching out the fibers of the external oblique that do flexion. So I'm going to hold it for 30 seconds and make sure you're breathing. Good. So while he's finishing that, another action of the external oblique that I chose is rotation to the same side and then also lateral flexion, so this movement. So I'll have him do a stretch for those, and then we'll do a measurement for external oblique for lateral flexion. Okay, you can sit up now. Okay, so for rotation, for the external oblique, I can stretch that out by having him lay on his back. So you can go ahead and lay on your back. And we're just going to do like a lower trunk rotation. So you'll go ahead and bend your knees. And then you'll let both knees fall to one side. Good. So now we're stretching out the right side. And then if you were to go to the other side, we're stretching out the left side of the external obliques. Good. And then for the last movement of the external obliques, we have lateral flexion. So that one I'm going to actually get a measurement for. So I'll have Angela go ahead and stand up right here. We have my tape measure. So lateral flexion is this movement. So I'm going to have you stand up nice and tall and then kind of just lean to one side. Okay. Good. So we're lengthening this side. So I'm going to go ahead and get a measurement from his middle finger to the floor. Okay. We are at about 45 centimeters. And then we'll go to the other side.
All right.
So now we're lengthening the left side. Here we're at about 39. So it looks like his left side is a lot tighter. So a stretch we can do for that one, he can be in the doorway or he can just be standing where he is, and then he can have one foot here, and then he can kind of just reach over. But we want to make sure he's up nice and tall and not here.
Oh, well, there goes my balance.
Okay, so we're going to hold that for about 30 seconds. So this is a static stretch for his external obliques on the left side because it was tighter. And then I'll go ahead and do a measurement after to see if that lengthening stretch helped.
Oh man, I think I gotta work on my balance.
If that's too hard, you don't have to cross your leg.
That's okay. I have to.
Okay, you can relax. Now I'm going to take that same measurement.
Okay.
So go ahead and do that same side bend to the right
Okay.
side. So our measurement before was 39. Okay, now we're at 41. So it looks like that stretch did kind of help, static stretching, especially if you were to do it for a couple more reps. will help with kind of lengthening that tight muscle. Okay, so next one we're gonna do is the wait, hold on. Okay, so then we have the longissimus. The origin of the longissimus is spinous process of L1 through L5, the dorsal sacrum, the iliac crest, and then it inserts into the transverse process of lumbar and thoracic vertebrae, ribs 2 through 12, and it does not do passive and active insufficiency. In order to lengthen this muscle, we are going to put the back into flexion. So longissimus extends the back. So if I were to have him stretch out that muscle, he's going to go ahead and touch his toes. And this one, you can either measure it with a tape measure or you can just kind of observe. So here, and then you can go ahead and raise back up. Good. So if he were to be tight, he wouldn't be able to go down that far. And we also want to look at the bend of the knees and things like that. So that's how you would lengthen the longissimus. You can also, oh yeah, that's it for that one. Okay, so we are going to move into the shoulder. So the muscles I picked for the shoulder are the deltoid and the lats. So the deltoid does a lot of different actions. The origin of the deltoid is the lateral third of the clavicle, the acromion, the spine of the scapula, and then it inserts into the deltoid tuberosity. And it does not perform passive and active insufficiency, but the actions that it does perform is flexion, shoulder abduction, and then also IR, ER, yes. So there's a couple different ways we can lengthen the anterior delt because it has so many different fibers. So one way to lengthen the anterior deltoid is we can have the patient kind of put their hands behind their back if possible. This will get it bilaterally, and then kind of go back here. Okay, so you can go ahead and try.
Uh-oh. This and then.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't think that's as far as it can go.
Yeah, so we can see he's pretty tight here. So we'll have him hold it for 30 seconds. So this is one where you can kind of just observe their range of motion. So we can see he's tight, and so if we put this into the interventions, we can kind of observe how much range of motion he's able to gain. Okay, you can go ahead and relax. That was 30 seconds. Okay, so another action of the deltoid, as we said, was abduction. So abduction, internal rotation for the anterior deltoid, and then external rotation for the posterior deltoid. So to kind of stretch another way to stretch the deltoid, all of the fibers, you can do just a across the body stretch. So we can go here and kind of observe how tight he is or how much space he has between his chest and his arm, and then do the other side. That side seems a little tighter, just as we observe it. So ideally, we would have him hold it for about 30 seconds. Okay.
30 seconds feels like a long time.
So the next shoulder, you can relax. The next shoulder muscle we're going to move into is the lats. So the lats do extension, shoulder extension, and then they also do help with adduction of the shoulder. So if I wanted to have him stretch out his lats, I can have him go ahead and lay on his back. So how do you put your head that way? Okay, yeah. So I'm going to have him, we're going to do one arm at a time. I'm going to have him go ahead and reach his arm, as far back as you can. Good. So you can see here that his arm is pretty much almost touching the table, but what I can do is I can get a tape measure, or I can use a goni, where I'm just going to use a tape measure, and see how many inches are in between his arm and the bed. So that's going to be 2 centimeters. And then we'll do the other side. This one's a lot tighter. And also, we noticed that his deltoid on this arm was also tighter. So then I'll take this measurement. Here we have 3 centimeters. So if I wanted Angelo to stretch out his left lat, I'm going to have you go quadruped for a second, and then I'm going to grab the foam roller. There's your left side. Yeah. So I'm going to have you go kind of into child's pose, but then with your arm. You're going to be here.
Okay.
So he's going to utilize the foam roller, and he's going to kind of go back into a child's pose, and then rolling his arm up into flexion. And then so we're stretching out that left lat. And then we're going to hold it for 30 seconds. And then I'll retake his measurement on that side. It was at 3, so we're going to see if we can get it, if this stretch will help get it to a smaller number. Okay. About 30 seconds. I'm going to have you go ahead and lay on your back one more time. And then I'm going to take my post-stretch measurement on that left arm. So go ahead and you'll do shoulder flexion just as much as you can. Yeah, I can already tell by observing that it's better. But let's see. Yeah, now we're at 1 centimeter. So he went from 3 centimeters to 1. So that was a good static stretch for him. Another stretch that would stretch the lats, since the lats do adduction, would be bringing it into abduction. So I could do that passively for him. So go ahead and lay on your back again.
I'll lay back.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
So if I were to do an assisted stretch with Angelo, I would have you just have your arm out here with your palm facing up and just relax. And then we can bring it up here into shoulder abduction. So that's going to stretch out these fibers of his lat. Good. Okay. So you can go ahead and sit up. Okay. And then as far as the movements of internal and external rotation, the anterior and posterior delts do those actions. And if I wanted to kind of assess that, I'll have him put his arm out here. And you can just relax your arm. And if you were to go into a lengthening position for the anterior delt, we're going to go here. So it's lengthening here. And then go ahead and go down here. And now we're lengthening the posterior delt. Okay, and relax. So you do that on both sides, ideally. Okay, next we're going to go into the elbow. So for the elbow, we have the 2 actions, flexion, extension. And so we're going to first start with the muscles that perform flexion. So that's the biceps brachii. It originates at the supraglenoid tubercle of the scapula and the radial tuberosity, or inserts into the radial tuberosity and the biceps aponeurosis. And it does perform active insufficiency because it crosses over the shoulder joint as well as the elbow joint. So if I were to put the biceps into a lengthening position, it would be elbow extension as well as shoulder extension. So that would be the passive insufficiency. So if I were to stretch that with Jello, he can do a doorway stretch. So if he were in a doorway, he can just go through here and stretch out that bicep, and he would hold it for 30 seconds. But I'm going to go ahead and do a measurement on both of his biceps to kind of see which one is tighter. So you can go ahead and lay it on your back again. So
This way's fine?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the biceps do flexion and assist with supination. So to counter that, I'm going to have him put his left arm into extension and then pronation. So go as much as you can. And then we also want to look for any compensation with the shoulder. So there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab my goni here. So it looks like he's pretty straight here, but I'm just gonna, I don't know if you can see, but I'm just gonna use my goni to get the actual degrees. So I'm putting my fulcrum at the elbow joint here. So we're at, and I'm also putting my movement arm at the radial tuberosity. Okay, so he's at like 2 degrees of elbow flexion, so he's not completely at 0, so he has very mild tightness. And then I'm gonna have you flip head that way so that way your other arm can go off. Okay, so now same thing, he's gonna do an extension and pronation, okay? And then take my goni, go here, and then radial tuberosity. So on this arm, he's at 3 degrees of elbow flexion. So I'm gonna have him go ahead and do the stretch to stretch out the bicep, and then we'll do another measurement. So I'm gonna have you go in the doorway. I'm just gonna flip my. So I'm gonna have him do the bicep stretch in the doorway. So we're gonna stretch out his right bicep. So he's in the doorway. Yeah. So you're gonna have your arm kind of straight, and then you're gonna step through. But you want to make sure they're keeping their shoulders square. So that way he's getting a nice stretch here, and we're gonna hold it for 30 seconds. So this is a form of static stretch using the assistance of the doorway. So here we're getting a full stretch into passive insufficiency because he's in shoulder extension as well as elbow extension. And if his arm were to be in active insufficiency, he would be here, elbow flexion and shoulder flexion. Out of breath. Okay, you can go ahead and relax. And now I'm going to take that measurement one more time. So we're going to go back to the table. Okay, so now we're going to take that measurement. We're going to go here. Now he's actually at 0 degrees. So it looks like that stretch was a good stretch for him to lengthen his bicep. So then we move into triceps. The triceps perform extension. If I were to put the tricep into passive insufficiency, it would be elbow and shoulder flexion. Active would be extension in the shoulder and the elbow. So the tricep originates at the infraglenoid tubercle of the scapula, and it inserts into the olecranon process of the ulna. And as I just said, it does perform passive and active insufficiency. So if I wanted to lengthen Jello's triceps, I'm going to go ahead and do a goni measurement. So you can just stay over, but we're going to go elbow flexion, and then you're going to try to bring your arm up as much as you can. Yeah, so he's going to go into elbow flexion, then he's also going to go into supination. Yeah, like that. Here, and then just bringing it back as much as you can. So we're really lengthening his tricep here. Is that as far as you can go?
I think it's just because of the table.
Oh, and so we see the table is blocking him, so we're going to move back a little bit. So here, and as much as he can. So we're stretching triceps a little lap, but we're going to measure triceps with the goni. So I'm going to go ahead and take my goni. And we're going to see. So he's at about 65 degrees. And then we're going to test the other side. So you go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, this one you're at 75 degrees. So this side is 10 degrees tighter than the other side. So if I were to take Jello through a tricep stretch, I'll have you go ahead and sit up for a second. A way he can stretch out his tricep on his own is going here and then taking the opposite side and pulling back into extension. So here. And then he's going to hold it for 30 seconds. Oh, man. Wrist. So we're going to do wrist, fingers, and then I'm going to do a different video for the rest. And then we're done.
It's just these 30 seconds feel so long.
Okay, go ahead and relax. And I'm going to go ahead and take the measurement again. So he was at 75, I think. So same thing, we're putting the tricep into, this lengthening position. So now he is at 66 degrees. So he was at 75. Now he's at 66. So that stretch was able to lengthen that tricep. That's something that he can do on his own at home, and that would be a helpful one for him. So that was the elbow. We're going to move into the wrist. The actions of the wrist, we have flexion, extension, radial deviation, and ulnar deviation. So the muscles I'm going to focus on are flexor carpi radialis and extensor carpi radialis, or extensor carpi ulnaris, actually. So flexor carpi radialis originates at the medial epicondyle of the humerus, and it inserts into the base of the second metacarpal. And then it does perform passive and active insufficiency. So the passive insufficiency for the flexor carpi radialis would be, so passive would be wrist extension, elbow extension. Active would be elbow flexion, wrist flexion. So flexor carpi radialis performs flexion and also performs radial deviation. So what I can do for Jello, I can go ahead and do a Goni measurement for wrist extension to see how tight his wrist flexors are. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and grab a bolster. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take a measurement for Jello. So I'm going to have you have your arm on here, and then I'm going to have you flip your hand here, and I'm going to see how, so bring your wrist like right here. Yeah, so I see how far you can go into wrist extension on his own. Good, and then other side. Wrist extension. Okay. Does that feel tight or painful at all?
It just feels tight.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and take a measurement with my Goni. So I'm going to see where.
I just feel like both of them are tight, if I'm going to be honest.
Go ahead and start at neutral.
I will.
So I'm here on the radial side. So go ahead and go. So this one is at 50 degrees. Extension, and then same thing on this side. So I'm on the radial side.
Oh, sorry. When we start.
This side, yeah, and then go down. This one's at 53. So the left side's a little tighter. So a stretch that I can have Angelo do to stretch out his flexor carpi radialis is I'm going to have him go here into wrist extension and then passively pull his all his digits back so that we're stretching out that muscle. So he's going to hold that for 30 seconds. And then I will redo my measurement. Okay, you can go ahead and relax. So I'm going to do that measurement one more time on that side.
No, you're fine.
Okay, so we're going to do that same movement again. So go ahead and look. See that one? Okay, go ahead. Now we're at 54. Okay, so he was able to gain a little bit of range of motion from that. The flexor carpi radialis also does radial deviation. So if I wanted him to go ahead and stretch that muscle out, he can kind of grab his thumb here, or he can have his hand here and then pull down. So if he were to be really tight, specifically here, he would feel that stretch. Good, and he would hold it ideally for about 30 seconds. Good, okay, so you can relax on that one. So moving into the extensor carpi ulnaris, that, to go ahead and stretch that one out, it's an extensor, so to stretch that, we're going to go into flexion, so lengthening the extensors. So if I were to, I already did a measurement, I don't have to. Okay, so if I were to have him stretch this one, he would go here, so opposite of the other stretch, and then pull down. So let's go ahead and just hold that one for a little bit. And then he would do it on both sides as well. While he's holding that, extensor carpi ulnaris also does ulnar deviation. So if I wanted him to stretch that out, it would be kind of the opposite of the radialis. He can kind of just passively stretch out those muscle fibers there. Okay, you can relax. Okay, so that's all of those. So now we're just gonna do fingers and thumb. So the muscles that I chose for the fingers and thumb are the lumbricals of the hand, because they can help with both flexion and extension. So they originate at the surfaces of the flexor digitorum profundus tendons, and then they insert into the extensor aponeurosis on the dorsal surface of the phalanges. And they do not perform active and passive insufficiency because they don't pass over two joints. So flexion of the lumbricals, I'm just going to do like an observatory test or assessment to see if he's tight in any of those regions. So I'm going to have him to lengthen the flexor part of the lumbricals. He's going to go ahead and kind of grab here, more at the joints here, and then pull down. So that way we're really stretching these deep muscles. So just stretching down. So you see here we're stretching in here and not so much the wrist. Okay, and then the other side. Good. And then, so to me, observing it, this side seemed a little tighter, and that's kind of consistent with the other wrist stretch we did. And then if I were to stretch the flexors, same idea. I would kind of go here around the knuckles and then pull down. Good, and then the other side. Good, and then so since he was a little tighter in the extension for the left hand, we're going to hold that one for 30 seconds. So pulling here, and pulling back. So try to keep your wrist kind of straight. So try to keep your wrist here. So he's very tight.
I'm trying.
So we're going to hold that for 30 seconds. So just making sure on this stretch, we're not really so much looking for stretching the wrist extensors. We could try to keep the wrist straight and then just pulling back here. But as you can see, if he's very tight, it might be hard for him to keep the wrist straight and pull here, so it might compensate here. So that kind of also shows you that he is pretty tight there. Okay, 5 more seconds. Okay, and relax. So that is the lengthening for the upper body.